Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
I'm standing on what to me and to thousands of other Thomians is considered hallowed ground. 2018 is a very special year for St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, and we're going to be talking to the warden, the current warden of STC Mount Lavinia, the Reverend Rev Billimoria, regarding what 100 years at Mount means to the school. Reverend Billimoria, thank you very much for taking time off to speak to us at News First regarding the upcoming celebrations to mark the school's centenary of the campus moving to Mount Lavinia. What is the significance to you of the campus here at Mount Lavinia?
Well, I mean, the school is 167 years old, having started off at Mutwal in 1851. But having moved here, over the last 100 years, I think we have consolidated, and over 100 years have done quite a bit in terms of becoming an institution that has established a name, that has served this country in so many ways, that has sent out so many products of this school to take on life and to be men of excellence in whatever area of life they've gone into. I think we've produced leaders of men for every sphere of life. I think the 100 years is a celebration not of a physical space or of these buildings that we see around us, but of 100 years of Thomians. Young men who went out into the world of men, the world of commerce, the world of politics, into all spheres of life, and had an impact for good on society, on the world, and basically fulfilled the vision of the founder, Bishop Chapman.
Warden, can you educate us a little bit on the reasons for the college to move and to become the school by the sea?
Well, it's very interesting that when Bishop Chapman first came to Sri Lanka, Ceylon as it was then known, in 1845, the first thing he wanted to do was to start a school. And ironically, he came and visited what was then a house in private hands that had been the governor's residence, and that is today the Mount Lavinia Hotel. It was up for sale, but it was just a little beyond his budget. And although he thought that it was the ideal location for his new school, it was too expensive, so he went back and he said, well, maybe not, and he built the school in Mutwal. Having then, after 67 years, relocated, we relocated because at Mutwal things began to change. The school was expanding, numbers were increasing, the space there was limited, we couldn't expand beyond certain areas of the property there. But more than all that, the harbour had also begun to change. Sailing ships had given way to coal-driven ships, and the coal was stored in spaces just below the school, and the coal dust had begun to impact the school in very serious ways. It had become a health hazard. So by around 1915 or so, Warden Stone had realized that if the school was to continue at Mutwal, it would create a serious problem for the students. And even by that time, even though Mutwal initially had been the most exclusive part of Colombo, where the governor and the attorney general, the chief justice, where they had all been living, it began to change. And as it began to change, so there was a rethinking that the school needs to move to a more conducive location.
You are also an old Thomian. You also attended school here at St. Thomas's College in Mount Lavinia. What does being here now as warden mean to you?
Well, it is something that's quite awe-inspiring and quite humbling. 25 years ago, when we celebrated 75 years at Mount, I had just left school. I had joined the staff under my warden at that time, Warden Neville Dialvis, who had asked me to actually sit down and write the history of the school from 1918 to 1993. Now, being the warden 25 years later, when we celebrate 100 years, is quite a humbling experience, an experience that has made me realize many things about what I can continue to do for my school, and I find it a great privilege to be the warden at this particular juncture of the school in its history.
We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back on the other side, we're going to be talking about the history of St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia. These buildings that you see around me, the chapel of the Transfiguration, the M block housing the upper school, and of course the library. Welcome back to News First special coverage of 100 years at Mount. We're in conversation with the Warden of St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, Rev Billimoria. Warden, I remember when I was a student here at the M block. We'd just come into lower 6th or grade 9, and the school was celebrating its 150th anniversary. There was a great sense of pride, of Thomian feeling that you could see among the students, the staff. Is it the same this time around as you're celebrating 100 years at Mount Lavinia?
I would say it is. I would say it is. Of course, the event is not as grand as celebrating 150 years of the school's existence, but it is significant that it is a centenary, and certainly every single student who is in school at the moment, from the nursery school which started last January, to the student in Call E, is going to be part of the new centenary group. And they will always be remembered as having been in school when we celebrated the centenary at Mount Lavinia. So there is this feeling of being part of something historic, something that's going to be remembered for a very long time, although the two events are different in emphasis. But of course, there has also been change over time, and I would say that a little bit of school spirit needs still to be kindled a little more than it used to be in the past. And of course, we always say it was better in our time. All of us say that it was better in our time. But I guess, yes, I think even now the students are excited. They're looking forward to the Thomian parade on Saturday. They're looking forward to the events on Friday. So there is that sense of excitement, perhaps not as much as it was for 150 years, but certainly it's there.
You mentioned the parade that's happening on Saturday and various other events that have been organized to commemorate the 100 years at Mount. Could you quickly run us through what it is that we're going to be seeing in the run-up to this celebration?
Well, on the 26th, that is Friday, that's the day that we will actually celebrate 100 years, because on the 26th of January 1918, the school opened here at Mount. And we opened with a service of dedication conducted by the then Bishop of Colombo, Right Reverend Ernest Arthur Copleston. So we will have a service of thanksgiving and rededication in the chapel, presided over by the Lord Bishop of Colombo, at which the preacher will be Bishop Dulip de Chikera, who was here for many years as assistant chaplain, as sub-warden. Then he went on to be bishop and became chairman of the board. So he is the ideal and most suitable person to preach on that occasion. We will be having a gathering of all the Thomian clergy who have been produced by the school, Anglican clergy. Old boys will gather. And after the service, the bishop will rededicate the main block, unveil a memorial plaque acknowledging that this building is 100 years old. He will then rededicate this building and unveil a memorial plaque acknowledging that it is also 100 years old, because both these buildings were dedicated and blessed on the 26th of January 1918. We will then go across to the lower school, where we will open the new lower school building, the 90 block. That building for the first time will provide a fully equipped staff room for the lower school staff. Even after all these years, the staff have not had a proper staff room, so they will now have a fully equipped staff room with a lot of other facilities for the lower school. Having finished that, we move to a special general assembly, ceremonial general assembly in the main hall, which will be preceded by the unveiling of a bust of Warden Stone and a portrait of Bishop Ernest Arthur Copleston, because it was Bishop Copleston, Warden Stone, and one of our prominent benefactors, Mr. C.E.A. Dias, who formed a triumvirate that executed the transfer. So we will remember all these venerable gentlemen on that occasion. We then move into the hall after that ceremony of unveiling. Incidentally, the unveiling is going to be done by two very senior Thomians. The bust of Warden Stone is going to be unveiled by Mr. Esmond Satarasinghe, one of the oldest members of the Thomian fraternity, and the portrait of Bishop Copleston by the Venerable Patrick Fernando, one of the most senior Thomian priests. The assembly will take the form of a ceremonial event. We will have 6 speeches by distinguished old Thomians representing 6 decades. Most of them are former head prefects of the college. We will have the present head prefect speaking on behalf of the present boys. We will have the release of Bishop Chapman's autobiography, which has been reprinted by Vijitayapa Publications for the occasion. We will have a book of poems and prose on St. Thomas's by Mr. Mervyn Kasichetti, the late Mr. Mervyn Kasichetti, released and handed over on that occasion. We will cut a large, ceremonially cut a large cake which will serve the entire gathering. And we will have 2 songs specially composed for the event, one by Mr. Priya Piris and one by Mr. Suresh De Silva, specially composed for this event. And that will be part of that assembly. So after the assembly, we will proceed and have fellowship together. That's Friday.
That's his Friday.
Yeah, Saturday will be the parade.
St. Thomas's is a truly global fraternity. Thomians are a truly global fraternity today. They're found in almost every corner of the world. They've truly spread their wings across the world. For all of the Thomians who have the opportunity of watching this interview via the invasion of the internet, is there any tidbits of interesting history that you want to share regarding this move to Mount Lavinia?
Well, I think, there are so many things that can be said. So many things that can be said about how things were when the college moved here, what life was like. I don't know where to begin and where to stop. You may not have time on this interview for all that. The early days of the college at Mount Lavinia have given us stories that are the stuff of legend. You know, if you read the anecdotes that old boys of that time have written about what life was like, the Spartan life, you know, where the boys had to walk to wells to draw water for bathing, and you know, the very, very difficult times that were there in the first few years at Mount, where they lived in houses around about, and the very basic facilities that were available, and how from there we went forward. There are stories to tell of the different wardens, how each one added their own stamp over the 100 years. Warden Stone brought the school, planted it here, and after a certain time he moved on. Warden McPherson came in, he built this beautiful structure, the hall and the boarding houses. In his time the college chapel was built, and he moved on. He also formed the Board of Governors of the college, which is also going to be 90 years old this year. It was founded in 1928. Then Warden Deseram came in and presided over the school for 26 years, the longest serving warden. During his time, the school was disrupted by the Second World War and had to move from these premises, which were taken over by the military. And that saw the birth of St. Thomas's Gurutalawa, because the school moved to Gurutalawa. But it also had centers at Milagiriya, at Kingswood College, at Gatambe, at Girls High School. So there are lots of stories that can be said about the history of the school over the last 100 years. Warden Davidson and his love for arts and drama, and you know, the Latin and Greek times of that, the classics of that time. Warden Anandanayagam, who was well loved by everybody. Warden Ilangakun, who basically planted so many of the wonderful old trees you see around. He was an agriculturist. He made this campus look quite beautiful when he was here. And then of course we had 16 great years of Warden Neville D'Alvis, during which time I was in school. And that was in itself, like many other golden ages, a golden age for St. Thomas's. A lot of the newer buildings came up in his time. The sports complex across the road among them, which was like the crown jewel of his period. We remember Dr. R.L. Heyman,
Yeah.
one of the greatest benefactors the school has had. He donated the swimming pool, the first swimming pool of a school anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
So there are lots of things that can be said about history and the stamp of history.
Speaking of stamps of history, we want to go in for one more break. When we return on the final segment, we'll be talking about what Warden Billimoria's stamp will be. Over the years at St. Thomas's, the successive wardens, as the current warden, Reverend Mark Billimoria pointed out, have placed a stamp on the school. When I joined school, the warden was Mr. Neville de Alvis. When I left school, the warden was Dr. David Ponnaya. Reverend Billimoria, warden sir, when you were also a student in school, Mr. Neville de Alvis was the warden, and his successor, of course, was Dr. David Ponnaya. Since then, you've had Mr. Padifut and also Professor Indra. What will your stamp on St. Thomas's be like? What is your vision for the school beyond these 100 years at Mount?
Well, every warden, I think, has to carry forward a lot of what his predecessors have put in place. Obviously, a lot of that has to go forward. And I've been fortunate to have inherited a school from the likes of Warden de Alvis, Warden Ponnaya, Warden Padifut and Warden de Soiza, all of whom had a very significant impact in very different ways, but a very significant impact on the life of the school. And I've got a lot of that to take forward. But I would say that I'm a person who believes in going back to the beginning. And for me, it is the vision of Bishop Chapman that still excites me. For Bishop Chapman, the goal of his school was not just sporting prowess or educational accomplishment, not just the exam results or getting, very good marks at exams or getting into university or doing well in cricket or rugby or whatever. For him, it was, what is the character of the future man going to be like? And he actually said it, the real end of all education is not the intellect alone, but to fix the principles of the future man, to make him good as well as wise. And I think for me, that initial vision is what inspires me still, and that for me is what I want to focus on in what time I will have here as warden. Taking the good things that all my predecessors have left me, the foundations that have been built, and to build on that, but also to go right down to the foundation and take from that foundation what needs to be recovered from time to time and bring that back into focus. Because I think Sri Lanka and the world needs more than anything else men of integrity and character, men who stand up for basic human values, a good sense of values. And if I can send out during my time young men from this school, not necessarily brilliant in academics or brilliant in sports, although we have been producing good academic results and good sporting results over the last few years, I would like to see good men going out into the world and leading good lives, decent lives, lives of integrity and character that would be the light and the salt for the world.
This has been a recurring theme for St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, from political leaders in this country, beginning with the father of independence, Sri Lanka, the Honorable D.S. Senanayake, to the revolutionary Honorable S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike, and beyond. Even today, St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia produces great leaders. But also, as you mentioned, the school prides itself on producing men with strength of character. What are the challenges that the school faces in the modern age?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges today is the challenge of the millennials. It's this whole idea of entitlement, that everything is readily available, and I think a lot of that is to do with the parents who give their children the impression that, if something doesn't come their way, the parents will come and fight for it for them. and get it for them. You know, they don't have to do anything for themselves. It's almost like taking a child by the hand and constantly leading that child through life right up to the college forms, when actually they should leave the child at the gate when they enter at grade 1. So we've gone into an era where children have a sense of entitlement, where they think that the school owes them something, and that will lead to a situation where they imagine society owes them something, whereas actually it's the other way around. Right? Warden Lanka, who was the warden when I joined the school, at the end of his school duty, as his term of duty as warden, made a speech which I recorded in my book 75 Years at Mount. He quoted, or he took a quote of President John F. Kennedy, and he said, "Don't ask what your school can do for you, but what you can do for your school." Today, it's another side. Today, it's what can the school do for me? What can society do for me? What can I get out of what I have? And I think that's the biggest challenge, because that same thing is going to spill over into society, and it's not about giving anymore, it's about getting that will take place. So I want to see a Thomian going out into the world who will serve, who will put service above self, who would continue those noble traditions of Thomians who throughout these 100 years at Mount and throughout the 167 years of existence of St. Thomas's have served, who have served Sri Lanka, who have served the world wherever they've gone. We've got people serving the world today, Thomians in every part of the world, on every continent, doing something good. I'm not saying it's a universal thing, I'm not generalizing, but there are those Thomians who are doing this. And that's the type of Thomian I would like to see, despite the challenge of the millennials.
How do you overcome this challenge?
Well, it's a constant case of trying to bring out from within the students what is latent within them. You see, that's the same with discipline. I mean, the whole problem of discipline today, you cannot enforce discipline like it used to be enforced. You cannot beat a child and get the child to fall in line. You have to appeal to the disciplined nature within a child, those principles and values that are latent within a child, and draw them out so that self-discipline will be the result. That leads to self-respect, and self-respect then leads to respect for others, and respect for others leads to service of others.
And what is the role of St. Thomas's has a very proud tradition of sports and even in academics as well. In bringing out the inherent good, what is the role that sports and the curriculum plays here at St. Thomas's?
I think if the academic life of the student and the extracurricular life of the student is nurtured correctly and harnessed properly, it can be a source for great good and a source for great development. The problem today, universally in this country, is that we are victims of a standardized system of education that kills the creativity within children, that does not encourage innovation. Children are forced into follow a standardized syllabus, they are forced to follow a standardized examination system, and the ability to think for themselves is reduced. So we need to help them to think creatively, to think innovatively, to think critically. Where sports are concerned, we need to break away from this thing of winning at any cost, winning at all costs. So at St. Thomas's, we decry all methods that can be adopted to win competitions and games at any cost and all cost. We have strict policies now about importing good sportsmen just to pad teams to win. We would prefer to nurture talent from our own junior teams, because at the end of the day, sports are for formation of all-round character of the sportsman, not simply to win games and tournaments. And if that's the only reason we play sports, then we have missed the bus.
Warden, when talking about St. Thomas's, I could go on forever and ever, and I'm sure, as I'm sure you would too, but the setting sun is informing us that our time, for today at least, has come to an end. I wish you all the very best in accomplishing your vision for St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, and thank you very much for speaking to me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Electronic media partner, Newsfirst and NTV NBC.